The morning sun streamed through the windows of a small apartment in San Francisco's Mission District, where a young cybersecurity expert was about to start a day that would change her life forever. Lin Zhang stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her blazer one last time before heading to what could be the most important interview of her career. She couldn't help but smile, thinking about how far she'd come. Just 10 years ago, she was that quiet kid in the back of the classroom who spent lunch breaks coding instead of gossiping. While other teenagers worried about prom dates, she was busy discovering security flaws in popular gaming platforms and responsibly reporting them to companies. "You're going to nail this," she whispered to herself, a habit she picked up from her mother, who always believed in the power of self-encouragement. The Tesla headquarters loomed ahead as her rideshare pulled up to the curb. The building wasn't as flashy as some Silicon Valley offices, but it had that unmistakable air of innovation about it. The security guard at the front desk looked up from his monitor and smiled. "Here for the CISO interview?" he asked, already reaching for the visitor badge. Word had spread fast about Tesla's search for a new cybersecurity chief, and over the past month, a parade of candidates had walked through these doors. But Lin was different. She hadn't applied for the job. They had come looking for her. It started with a LinkedIn message that seemed too good to be true. Then came the phone calls, the video interviews, and finally, an invitation to meet the team in person. Her reputation had preceded her: 3 major patents in AI-driven threat detection, a track record of protecting some of the biggest names in tech from sophisticated cyber attacks, and a knack for explaining complex security concepts in simple terms that even boardroom executives could understand. The elevator ride to the 14th floor gave her just enough time to review her mental notes. She'd spent weeks studying Tesla's public security infrastructure, finding potential weak points that others might have missed. It wasn't about showing off. It was about proving she cared enough to do her homework. The interviews flew by in a blur of technical questions, scenario planning, and strategy discussions. Lin found herself drawing diagrams on whiteboards, debating security protocols with senior engineers, and even having an impromptu lunch discussion about the future of automotive cybersecurity. It felt less like an interview and more like she was already part of the team. Then came the moment she'd been both anticipating and dreading, the final interview with Elon Musk himself. The conference room door opened, and there he was, wearing a simple black t-shirt and holding a large coffee mug. No entourage, no fanfare. "So," he said, sitting down across from her, "I heard you found a way to hack a competitor's autonomous driving system in less than 6 hours." His eyes twinkled with curiosity. Lin leaned forward slightly. "Actually, it was 4 hours," she corrected him with a confident smile. "But more importantly, I helped them fix it before anyone else could find it." What was supposed to be a 30-minute interview turned into a 2-hour discussion about everything from quantum encryption to the philosophy of artificial intelligence safety. They debated, disagreed, found common ground, and most importantly, challenged each other's thinking. "You know," Musk said as their time was wrapping up, "most people come in here trying to impress me with buzzwords and promises. You came in with actual solutions and weren't afraid to tell me when you thought I was wrong." He paused, taking a sip from his now cold coffee. "We need more of that around here." The job offer came the next day. Chief Information Security Officer at Tesla, with a mandate to revolutionize their cybersecurity infrastructure from the ground up. The salary was astronomical, the benefits were incredible, but that's not what made Lin say yes. It was the challenge, the opportunity to protect not just data, but actual human lives. As she packed up her small office at her previous company, her old boss stopped by. "Tesla's a different beast," he warned. "Musk runs it like no other company. Aren't you sure you're ready for that?" Lin carefully placed her lucky mechanical keyboard in its carrying case. "Ready? Maybe not. But that's exactly why I need to do it." She looked out the window at the San Francisco skyline. Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most important changes. She had no idea just how prophetic those words would turn out to be. In just a few weeks, she would find herself at the center of a storm that would shake Tesla to its foundations and force everyone involved to question what they valued more: speed or safety, innovation or security, loyalty or truth. Little did Lin know, as she walked out of that office for the last time, that her biggest challenge wouldn't be the technical problems she'd face at Tesla. It would be standing up for what she believed was right, even if it meant going against one of the most powerful figures in tech. 3 weeks into her new role at Tesla, Lynn was still getting used to the company's breakneck pace. The office never really slept. Engineers worked around the clock, fueled by a mixture of ambition and expensive coffee from the fully automated barista station in the break room. She'd taken to coming in early, using the quiet morning hours to dig deep into Tesla's systems without interruption. That particular morning, something caught her eye. She'd been running a comprehensive security audit, the kind that most companies do once a year, but she preferred to do monthly. Her computer screen flickered with lines of code as her custom-built scanning tool worked its way through Tesla's autonomous driving systems. "That can't be right," she muttered, leaning closer to her monitor. The first cup of coffee sat forgotten on her desk as she typed furiously, following a trail of digital breadcrumbs. What started as a routine check had led her to something that made her stomach turn. The security vulnerability she discovered wasn't just a small crack in the armor, it was a potential catastrophe waiting to happen. In simple terms, a skilled hacker could potentially gain remote access to a Tesla's core systems. The implications were terrifying. Someone could potentially control the steering, acceleration, or brakes of any Tesla on the road. Lynn ran the tests again and again, hoping she was wrong. By lunchtime, her office looked like a scene from a detective movie. Whiteboards covered in diagrams, multiple screens displaying different aspects of the vulnerability, and sticky notes everywhere. Her team members kept peeking in, curious about what had their normally composed boss so worked up. "Hey, you haven't been to any meetings today," said Raj, her deputy, poking his head through the door. He stopped short when he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" Lynn beckoned him over and spent the next 20 minutes explaining her findings. Raj's face grew increasingly serious as he understood the implications. "We need to take this up the chain," he said finally. "But you know what that means: project delays, resource reallocation. Production numbers will take a hit," Lynn finished his thought. Tesla's stock price was closely tied to its production and delivery numbers, and any significant delay could spook investors. But she couldn't see any other option. She decided to skip the traditional corporate channels. Elon had made it clear during her interview that he valued direct communication, and this was too important for email chains and committee meetings. Using her direct line to his office, a privilege given to only a handful of executives, she sent a message requesting an urgent meeting. The response came within minutes. "In meetings all day. Join executive dinner at HQ tonight, 7 p.m. We'll discuss." The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Lynn knew she'd have one shot at explaining this in a way that would get immediate action. She prepared diagrams, ran simulations, and even created a simple demonstration that could show the vulnerability without actually compromising any systems. As she walked into the executive dining room that evening, Lynn felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. The room was filled with Tesla's top brass, heads of production, engineering, sales, and finance. Elon sat at the head of the table, simultaneously eating a salad and typing on his phone. "Lynn, join us," he called out, gesturing to an empty seat. "I hear you found something interesting in our systems." The room quieted. All eyes turned to her. This was the moment that would define her career at Tesla, maybe her entire professional life. She took a deep breath and pulled out her laptop. "Yes, and I think everyone needs to see this," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What I'm about to show you isn't just a minor security issue. It's something that could affect every Tesla on the road." As she began her presentation, she noticed the expressions around the table changing from mild interest to concern. Even Elon had put down his phone, his brow furrowed in concentration. Lynn explained the vulnerability in clear, simple terms, carefully balancing technical detail with real-world implications. "The good news is we can fix this," she concluded. "The bad news is it's going to take time and resources. We need to halt several key projects temporarily, and our next quarter's numbers will take a hit." The silence that followed was deafening. She could practically hear the executives mentally calculating the cost, the delays, the market impact. Elon's face was unreadable, his fingers drumming slowly on the table. Finally, he spoke. "How confident are you about this?" "Confident enough that I'd stake my job on it," Lynn replied without hesitation. The next morning dawned gray and foggy in Silicon Valley, fitting weather for what was about to unfold. Lynn arrived at Tesla headquarters early, her presentation materials prepared for the emergency executive meeting Elon had called. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since last night's dinner, with messages from concerned team members and curious executives. The top-floor conference room, usually reserved for board meetings, was already filling up when she arrived. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Engineers sat on one side, their laptops open and fingers hovering over keyboards. Finance executives clustered on the other, whispering among themselves and occasionally glancing at their phones to check the morning's stock prices. Lynn set up her laptop at the front of the room, conscious of every eye on her. She'd chosen to wear her lucky navy blazer, the same one she'd worn to her first coding competition back in college. Under the confident exterior, her heart was racing. This wasn't just another presentation, this was a moment that could change everything. At exactly 8:00 a.m., Elon walked in, carrying his usual large coffee mug. The room fell silent. He'd brought reinforcements, Tesla's original security architecture team, people who'd built the systems that Lynn was now criticizing. Their presence sent a clear message: this wasn't going to be easy. "All right," Elon said, settling into his chair. "Let's get to the bottom of this. Lynn, you have the floor. Show us exactly what we're dealing with." Taking a deep breath, Lynn launched into her presentation. This time, she prepared something different from last night's dinner discussion. Instead of just showing the technical vulnerabilities, she started with a story. "Imagine this," she began, clicking to her first slide. "A family is driving their Tesla on the highway, mom and dad in the front, 2 kids in the back. They trust their car. They believe in Tesla's commitment to safety. But what they don't know is that right now, someone sitting in a basement anywhere in the world could potentially take control of their vehicle." The room grew even quieter. Lynn could see parents in the audience shifting uncomfortably in their seats. She moved through her presentation methodically, building her case piece by piece. When she demonstrated a proof-of-concept hack in a controlled environment on a test vehicle, several engineers began taking furious notes. Even the finance executives stopped checking their phones. "The fix isn't simple," she continued, pulling up a timeline chart. "We need to revamp our entire security architecture. Yes, it will delay the next software update. Yes, it will impact our production schedule. But ask yourselves, what's the cost of not doing this?" That's when the debate erupted. The original security team jumped in, arguing that her scenarios were extreme, that their existing safeguards were sufficient. The finance team chimed in with projections of lost revenue and market share. Production managers worried about missing delivery targets. Through it all, Elon remained unusually quiet, watching the back and forth like a tennis match. His expression was unreadable, but his fingers drummed steadily on the conference table. A habit Lynn had learned meant he was deep in thought. Finally, he raised his hand, and the room fell silent again. "What if," he said slowly, "we found a middle ground? We could implement the most critical fixes now and phase in the rest over time. That way, we maintain our production schedule and address the security concerns." It was a reasonable compromise, the kind of solution that would please the board, satisfy investors, and give everyone a way to save face. Lynn could feel the room's energy shifting, people nodding in agreement. It was the perfect corporate solution, but she couldn't accept it. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice firm but respectful, "I understand the desire to find a middle ground. But cybersecurity isn't something we can partially fix. It's like being a little bit pregnant, impossible. Either our systems are secure or they're not. There's no in-between when people's lives are at stake." The room held its breath. Nobody talked to Elon Musk like that in his own company. Lynn could see her team members cringing, the other executives looking anywhere but at her. But she stood her ground, meeting Elon's intense gaze. "You hired me because I tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable," she continued. "Right now, the truth is that we need to stop, fix this properly, and then move forward. Anything less would be betraying our customers' trust." For what felt like an eternity, nobody moved. The air conditioning hummed softly in the background. Outside, a plane drew a white line across the morning sky. Inside the conference room, 2 strong wills clashed in silence. Finally, Elon stood up. His face was still unreadable, but there was something different in his eyes now. A mixture of respect, and was that irritation? "Thank you for your honesty," he said quietly. "We'll need to discuss this further. Everyone, check your emails this evening for next steps." As people filed out of the conference room, Lynn began packing up her materials. She couldn't help but notice how quickly everyone avoided making eye contact with her. Only Raj, her deputy, lingered behind. "That was either the bravest or the craziest thing I've ever seen," he whispered. "For what it's worth, I think you're right." Lynn managed a small smile. Sometimes being right is the loneliest place to be. As she walked back to her office, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental has shifted. She'd spoken her truth, stood her ground, and defended what she believed was right. Now all she could do was wait for the fallout. The rest of the day passed in a strange haze. Lynn sat in her office, catching up on emails and routine tasks, but her mind kept drifting back to the morning's confrontation. The usually bustling hallway outside her office had grown surprisingly quiet. People hurried past her door without their usual waves or friendly hellos. Around 6 p.m., when most of the office had cleared out, her computer chimed with a new email notification. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the sender, Elon Musk. The subject line was simple: Security concerns, next steps. Lynn took a sip of her now-cold tea, clicked open the email, and felt her eyes widen as she read its contents. Instead of the expected disciplinary action or project timeline she'd anticipated, Musk had something else in mind entirely. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Pacific Time, you will defend your position in a live-stream debate with our security team. All Tesla employees worldwide will be watching. Come prepared to demonstrate your findings and propose solutions. This is your chance to prove your concerns are valid." She read the email 3 times, making sure she hadn't misunderstood. A public debate, live-streamed to the entire company. This was classic Elon, turning a corporate disagreement into a public spectacle, challenging conventional business practices in favor of radical transparency. Her phone buzzed. It was Raj. "Did you see the email? This is unprecedented." Lynn texted back, "Yeah, looks like tomorrow's going to be interesting." She stayed late that night, preparing her case. The cleaning staff found her surrounded by empty coffee cups and whiteboards filled with diagrams. One of the janitors, an elderly man who'd been working at Tesla since the early days, paused at her door. "You remind me of him, he said, leaning on his mop. "Elon, I mean. Back when Tesla was just starting. He'd be here all night too, fighting for what he believed in. Sometimes the biggest dreams come with the biggest fights." Lynn smiled, touched by the unexpected encouragement. "Thanks. I needed to hear that." She finally left the office at midnight, her presentation polished and her arguments refined. The drive home through Silicon Valley's empty streets gave her time to think. Was she really ready to put everything on the line like this? Her career, her reputation, her future in the industry. The next morning, she arrived early to find the main conference room transformed. A professional streaming setup had been installed overnight, multiple cameras, lighting rigs, and a sophisticated audio system. The technical team was running final checks, and someone had even set up a makeup station in the corner. "They're taking this seriously," Raj commented, appearing at her side. "Half the engineers in my department are setting up viewing parties. This is turning into the tech world's version of a prize fight." Lynn nodded, trying to stay calm. "Any word on who I'm up against?" "The entire original security architecture team," he replied. "Plus some new faces from SpaceX's Cybersecurity division. They flew them in last night." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Lynn reviewed her notes one last time, checked her demonstrations, and even let the makeup artist touch up her face for the cameras. By 1:45 p.m., the room was filling up with key executives and team leaders. Others would be watching from their desks or conference rooms around the world. At precisely 2 p.m., the red recording lights blinked on. Elon stood at the front of the room, addressing the cameras directly. "Today, we're doing something different," he began. "At Tesla, we believe in transparency and open debate. One of our newest executives has raised serious concerns about our security infrastructure. Rather than handle this behind closed doors, we're going to hash it out here in front of everyone. The truth will emerge through debate and demonstration. He gestured to both sides, Lin at one table, the security team at another. The format is simple. Each side will present their case. Then we'll have an open discussion. Finally, I'll make a decision based on what we learn here. Remember, we're all on the same team. We all want what's best for Tesla and our customers. The debate began. The security team went first, defending their work with slides full of technical specifications and safety statistics. They spoke about their years of experience, the millions of miles driven without security incidents, the rigorous testing protocols already in place. As Lin listened, she felt a sudden calm settle over her. This wasn't just about being right anymore. It wasn't about winning an argument or proving a point. It was about protecting people, real families in real cars on real roads. Everything else was just noise. When her turn came, she stood up slowly, looked directly into the main camera, and began to speak. She knew that somewhere out there, thousands of Tesla employees were watching, waiting to see what would happen next. The next hour would change everything, not just for her, but for the future of automotive security itself. Little did she know, this public debate would become one of the most talked about moments in Tesla's internal history, and her next words would be quoted in tech circles for years to come. The livestream counter showed over 90,000 Tesla employees watching worldwide as Lin stood up to make her case. She ignored the cameras, the lights, and the tension in the room. Instead, she thought about her grandfather, who had taught her that doing the right thing was rarely the easy thing. Before I show you any code or technical details, she began, her voice steady, I want us all to remember why we're here. Tesla isn't just a car company. We're not just selling luxury vehicles. We're building the future of transportation, and with that comes a responsibility that's bigger than quarterly profits or production deadlines. She clicked to her first slide, not a technical diagram, but a photo of a family standing proudly next to their new Tesla. This is from Tesla's own marketing materials. Look at their faces, the trust in their eyes. They believe in us. They believe their children are safer in our cars than in any others. Today, I'm going to show you why we need to protect that trust. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most dramatic moments in Tesla's corporate history. Lin didn't just present data, she demonstrated live, on a test vehicle in the parking lot, how the security vulnerability could be exploited. The cameras followed her outside, where a red Model 3 sat waiting. What you're about to see has been cleared by our legal team and is being performed on a controlled test vehicle, she explained. Then, using only a laptop and some custom code, she showed how a potential attacker could gain access to critical vehicle systems. The collective gasp from the audience was audible when the car's windows suddenly rolled down, its doors unlocked, and the steering wheel began to turn by itself. Back in the conference room, the security team's faces had gone pale. This isn't just theoretical, Lin continued, returning to the podium. The same vulnerability exists in every Tesla on the road right now. Yes, fixing it will cost us time and money, but imagine the cost of not fixing it. In human lives, in lost trust, in damaged reputation. She pulled up another slide, this one showing a timeline and resource allocation plan. I've worked out exactly what we need to do. 3 weeks of focused development time. Yes, it will delay the next software update. Yes, it will impact our quarterly numbers, but we can get ahead of this before anyone else discovers it. That's when Elon stepped in. He had been unusually quiet throughout the presentation, but now he moved to the front of the room. What you're proposing would push back our entire production schedule. We have shareholders to answer to, delivery promises to keep. Lin took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. Mr. Musk, when you hired me, you said Tesla needed people who would tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Well, here's the truth. We can either take a hit to our stock price now, by choice, or we can take a much bigger hit later when this vulnerability is discovered by someone with malicious intent. The room fell silent. You could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. Thousands of employees around the world waited to see how Elon would respond. What if we implement a partial fix? He suggested, his tone measured. Something that addresses the most critical aspects while keeping our production timeline intact. Lin shook her head. That's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken arm. It might look like we're doing something, but it doesn't solve the real problem. Our customers trust us with their lives. We can't compromise on that. She clicked to her final slide. A simple image of the Tesla mission statement to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. This mission statement isn't just about environmental sustainability, Lin said quietly. It's about sustainable business practices, about building something that lasts, something people can trust. We can't achieve that mission if we're not willing to make hard choices to protect our customers. The tension in the room was electric. Several executives were furiously typing on their phones, probably calculating the potential impact on their departments. The security team was huddled together, whispering and pointing at their own notes. Elon paced the front of the room, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned to face both the room and the cameras. "You've certainly given us a lot to think about," he said. "We'll need to discuss this further with the board. Everyone, thank you for your time today." As the live stream ended and people began filing out of the room, Lin started packing up her materials. She felt drained but proud. Whatever happened next, she knew she'd stayed true to her principles. Raj appeared at her side, helping her gather her papers. "That was intense," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, I think you're going to go down in Tesla history one way or another." Lin managed a small smile. "Sometimes that's not up to us. All we can do is stand up for what we believe in and let the chips fall where they may." As she walked to her office, employees she passed in the hallway gave her a mix of admiring and concerned looks. Her phone was already filling up with messages from colleagues around the world, some supportive, others critical of her stance. She sat at her desk, looking out at the California sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. On her screen, her email inbox was suspiciously quiet. She knew that somewhere in the building, important people were having important conversations about her future at Tesla. But strangely, she felt at peace. Whatever happened next, she had done what she believed was right. And sometimes that had to be enough. The next morning dawned crisp and clear in Silicon Valley. Lin arrived at the Tesla headquarters earlier than usual, her access badge still working, a good sign, she thought. The security guard gave her the same friendly nod he always did, but there was something different in his eyes today. Respect, maybe. Word of yesterday's livestream debate had clearly spread beyond just Tesla employees. She had barely settled at her desk when her computer pinged with an urgent message. "Meeting in main conference room. 8 a.m. sharp." The sender? Elon Musk's executive assistant. The walk to the conference room felt longer than usual. Employees she passed either nodded encouragingly or quickly looked away. No middle ground, just like the security issue she'd raised. The main conference room, so packed during yesterday's debate, now held just 3 people: Elon Musk, the head of HR, and the company's chief legal officer. Lin's heart sank. This was typically how high-level terminations were handled. "Please, sit down," Elon said, gesturing to the chair across from him. His expression was unreadable, but there was an intensity in his eyes that Lin hadn't seen before. "I spent most of the night thinking about what you showed us yesterday," he began, "and reviewing feedback from our teams worldwide. Do you know what the most common response was?" Lin shook her head. "Fear," he said simply, "not just about the security vulnerability, but about what it means that one of our newest executives was willing to risk everything to bring it to light. That's uncomfortable for a lot of people in leadership positions." He paused, taking a sip from his ever-present coffee mug. "It's also exactly what we need more of." Lin blinked, not sure she'd heard correctly. But Elon continued, his tone hardening slightly. "The way you chose to handle this, forcing a public confrontation, potentially damaging company morale, that's not something we can reward. It sets a challenging precedent." The HR director slid a document across the table. Lin's heart sank as she read the title, Separation Agreement. "We're prepared to offer you a generous severance package," the HR director explained. "Full benefits, 6 months' salary, and a positive reference for your next position. All we ask is that you sign an NDA about the security issues you've discovered." Lin stared at the document, her mind racing. This was actually a better outcome than she'd expected. A cushy landing, a clean break, and the ability to move on with her career intact. The smart move would be to take it. But something didn't feel right. "What about the security vulnerability?" she asked quietly. "We'll handle it," Elon replied. "You've made your point. We'll implement the fixes, but we'll do it our way, on our timeline." Lin pushed the document back across the table. "I'm sorry, but I can't sign this. The vulnerability exists now. It needs to be fixed now. Waiting isn't an option." "You understand what you're giving up?" the legal officer asked, raising an eyebrow. "I understand what I'm standing for," Lin replied. Elon's face remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or frustration, probably both. "Then we have nothing more to discuss," he said, standing up. "Please clear out your office by noon." Within an hour, Lin's personal belongings were packed into a single box. As she walked through the office one last time, Raj caught up with her at the elevator. "I heard what happened," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, most of the engineering team thinks you're right. Some are already talking about leaving if the security issues aren't addressed." Lin managed a small smile. Sometimes the right path isn't the easiest one. As she walked out of Tesla headquarters for the last time, her phone buzzed. A news alert. Elon Musk tweets about balancing innovation and security at Tesla. She didn't need to read it to know what it said. But then her phone buzzed again, and again, and again. LinkedIn messages, emails, text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Word had gotten out about what had happened at Tesla, and the tech world was paying attention. By the time she reached home, she had received inquiries from 3 major autonomous vehicle startups, 2 cybersecurity firms, and even a few Tesla competitors. They'd all said basically the same thing. They wanted someone who put security and ethics first, no matter the cost. A week later, Lin sat in another conference room, this time at a promising autonomous vehicle startup that had made waves with its commitment to safety and security. The CEO, a former safety systems engineer, looked at her with genuine admiration. "What you did at Tesla," she said, "that's exactly the kind of integrity we need here. We're smaller, yes. We might not have the same resources or name recognition, but we believe that safety and security aren't optional features. They're the foundation everything else is built on." Lin found herself smiling for the first time in days. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. As she signed her new contract, with a higher salary and a clearer mandate to prioritize security, Lin thought about how quickly things had changed. Her stand at Tesla hadn't just cost her a job, it had shown her where she really belonged. The story spread through Silicon Valley like wildfire. While some criticized her for being inflexible, others held her up as an example of ethical leadership in tech. Several industry publications wrote about the incident, turning it into a case study on the balance between innovation speed and security in modern technology companies. 3 months later, Tesla quietly released a major security update. The changelog didn't mention any specific vulnerabilities, but Lin recognized the fixes she had identified. She allowed herself a small smile when she read the news. Sometimes, she realized, losing a battle can help you win the war. Her actions hadn't just forced one company to take security seriously, they had sparked a larger conversation about responsibility and ethics in the tech industry. As she walked into her new office, where her team was already working on building the most secure autonomous driving system in the industry, Lin felt at peace. She had stayed true to her principles and in doing so, had found her true path. The security guard at her new workplace smiled as she passed. "Another early start?" he asked. "Always," Lin replied. "After all, someone has to make sure the future is not just innovative, but safe."